All right, I'm in John chapter 16, Gospel of John chapter 16. I'm following up with John chapter 16, verse 33. I started it in the previous message. In verse 33, Jesus said, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." And I divided this up into three parts. The idea of in him you will have peace, and I've already had a lot to say about that in previous messages. In the last message, I spoke about the idea of tribulation, that in this world we will have tribulation. I introduced that. I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about that in this message, and then I will probably introduce the third part, which has to do with Jesus overcoming the world as it relates to tribulations. All right, so what we have here are the final words of Jesus to his disciples before he is arrested, crucified, and is resurrected from the dead. We have his last words to his disciples here. And in the previous message, I was talking about how people will often look to God because they're having problems in their life, they're having tribulations, they're having difficulties, and they believe, or they're told, that if they will turn to God, if they'll believe in him, trust him, surrender to the gospel in whatever way that they may describe it, then he will intervene in their lives. And he will perform miracles, signs, wonders. He will have, they will have lots of his divine intervention in their lives, and so that they can overcome the troubles and the difficulties and struggles and the tribulations that they are encountering. There are a lot of people who turn to God under these conditions, in these circumstances. And there are times when God has intervened, from my opinion, as I have heard the testimony of other people, and as I have experienced some things in my own life, I can say that sure, there are times when he will intervene and he will do something, in a sense, but certainly not always. And what people will sometimes have to deal with is they will have to deal with a point of decision of, do they reject this God who they turn to because he didn't come through? He didn't solve the problems of life for them. Will they reject him, or will they consider that maybe there are other things that are more important to God and that you should turn to him for those reasons? And I explained that this can be really hard for people because people can tend to be self-consumed. People are so consumed with themselves that the thought that maybe God has some objectives in mind, that thought is just completely irrelevant. It just has nothing to do with anything for these kinds of people. What these people are thinking, for the most part, is that they have needs. They have needs. And these needs, well, they might very well be very important, but they are important to these people. And regardless of whether they're really genuine or not, or whether they are significant or not, can they really go without? Are these really well classified as needs? And people will have to have discussions and have to take those things into consideration. But there are people who take the posture, they make the assumption that they have all of these needs, and of course God has these abilities. He has these abilities. And so because there are these needs and God has these abilities, well, this is how the world is. To each according to his ability, and to each according to his need. So if God has all these abilities and you have all these needs, well, we have the perfect give and take relationship. God gives, you take. All right? And people will look to God in this way, as if that's supposed to be a healthy relationship. That's what relationships are for. They're about meeting people's needs. Well, except for those people who have abilities. We don't care about their needs necessarily. Just, whoever has abilities, they have to provide for all the needs of everyone else who have decided that they are not going to have those abilities. All right, but in a divine context, people will turn to God with this kind of an attitude. And it is the way of the world in many respects. But God, in general, from what I can tell, he does not comply with this kind of an attitude. All right, but this is where a lot of people are coming from. This is what they are thinking. Okay, let me move forward a little bit to the topic of predestination in the context of having tribulation in this world. When people are having difficulties and struggles, they will wonder, is this really what God has in mind for me? I mean, is this what he decided, that I'm supposed to suffer? When people think of it in that way, they look at what Jesus said. When Jesus said, in this world, you will have tribulation. That means you, you awful, wicked, evil person. You're going to have some tribulations in your life, and I'm going to make sure of it. This is what people will start to think. Is this me? Is this what God created me for? Is so that I can suffer? I can have all these tribulations? Is this what he had in mind? Is this what he has in mind for me? Obviously not for you, but for me, I guess that's the way it is. Why should I, love this God? Why is this the kind of love he has for me? These are things that people are thinking, and when this subject of predestination that comes up, that there are some people who have been created by God to be saved, and other people who have been created by God in order to not be saved, but to suffer and to just experience all kinds of pain and difficulty and tribulation in their lives. All right, this is what people come up with. And as I hinted at in the previous message, this has history to it. There are people who can make this up in their own minds just fine. You don't have to study pagan Greek philosophy. All you need to do is get a campfire. I call this campfire theology. Just get yourself a campfire, make a campfire, and invite a few friends who can hang around the campfire, and just ask yourselves the question, well, now, if there is a God, then what would he be like? And chances are you're going to get really close to pagan Greek philosophy. No matter how you approach it, there are many ways that people can come up with the same kinds of beliefs. So people will often embrace what is promoted in the Christian world. They will embrace it because it conforms very well to what they already believe. All right? And this is one of the reasons why Augustine became the most influential Christian theologian of all time through the Catholic Church. It was because the people already believe that stuff. They already believe that God has decided all things, that we already have providence, that everything is already predetermined. Everything is predestined for each individual person in their individual lives, that there is a plan for each individual person. And that there is a will of God. His will for you is unique just for you, kind of thing. And these beliefs that people had were compatible with what Augustine presented. He was popular because most people believed what he was teaching. And the same thing happened in the Protestant realm of Christianity through Calvin. The exact same thing. Most people already believed that kind of stuff, and so when they heard it presented from the pulpits, they embraced it as, oh yes, of course that's true. Of course, because we all kind of already believe this. They already believed in this idea of providence, in this predetermination on an individual basis. Another word that's more suitable for this is the word destiny. That's the word that's more suitable for this. The word destiny. People believe in destiny, and they just call it God. But that's what they really believe in. They want to believe in this. They want there to be a destiny for them. They do, because that way they don't have to figure out one on their own for themselves. They don't have to do that. And of course, if their destiny doesn't turn out to be all that good, well, they're a victim. They're a victim. But don't worry. Don't worry. One day, you'll go to heaven, and he'll make up the difference. You'll go up there, and he'll make up for how you, if you go, he'll make up for how you suffered more than other people. What this means is that you're going to heaven is a debt collection experience where God owes you, and you're going to go and collect. You're going to collect on what God owes you. That's what people end up with. They end up with these kinds of beliefs. They just don't want to say it like this, straightforward and direct. All right? They don't want to say it the way it really is. Because if they did, like I just said that, they say, "Oh, no, we don't believe that. No, we don't." You know what that means? They said that what that means is that they don't want other people to know that that's what they really believe. That's what they're really saying. We don't believe it. Yes, you do. All right? You believe in destiny. That's what you're into. And this is just the normal struggle because it is something that people can come up with just by sitting around a campfire. It's all about the flesh anyway. It's what it really ends up coming down to. And it ends up showing itself in the same context of to each according to their ability and to each according to their need. And it just appeals to these people. Now, of course, there's a lot in the scriptures about predestination. There's a lot there. Things that were predetermined. Of course there is. God has predestined some things. He predetermined some things. How about salvation? Of course he anticipated that there would be a fall of humanity. And so when he created the earth to begin with, he created it with the recognition that one day there's going to have to be a Messiah. And so of course the Messiah was predestined. All right? And there were many things that were predetermined because of the salvation that he would present. All right? For example, when Jesus died and rose from the dead and the gospel went into effect, it was at that time that there was an opportunity for the Jew and the Gentile to become one in Christ. This was predetermined by default, just by the introduction of a Savior for a world that was going to fall. All right? And so, of course, that was predetermined. But what was predetermined? It was that two groups of people would become one in the Messiah. The predestination has to do with groups of people. It has to do with covenants. It doesn't have to do with individuals. That's what people would like to believe, but I don't see that. As I have studied the subject of things being predetermined by God in the scriptures, I generally come up with the conclusion that his pursuit of things being predetermined have to do with group relationships, all right, with groups of people coming together or groups of people being saved, but not individuals. The idea of there being an individual leads you to a different kind of God entirely. Because you end up removing the individual choices of the people, all right? The predetermined things, the things that were predestined, were to give people an opportunity to make a decision, to surrender to a covenant or not. All right, it had to do with giving people a choice. But when people come up with these theologies that refer to individual predetermined things, you end up by default taking away choice. You take away free will. You remove those things. Not even the angels had to deal with this. The angels had free will. They did not have a choice when it came to believing that there was a God. That was forced upon them. All right? God manifested himself to the angels in a sense saying, look, here I am. I am real. And they could not deny his existence at all. They had no choice in that matter. Now, we as people here on this earth, we have the choice to deny his existence or not. People do it all the time, if you haven't noticed. All right, but the angels did not have that option. What they could choose to do was they could choose to rebel from their position and from the purpose through which God created them. And many of them did. About a third of the angels rebelled against God. They made a decision that they were no longer going to be a part of his activities. That's all they decided. They decided that they were going to decide for themselves what their future was going to be, that they were going to be their own gods, that they would live independently of him as a person, that they would separate from him and no longer have the relationship with him that he defined for them to have with him. They decided they didn't want that anymore. And who are these angels? They are the demons. Okay? And what would they do? What could they do? Well, what they have been doing ever since then is about all they've got left, which is to just simply engage in evil. That's all they got. All right? And so the angels had this relationship with God such that they could not choose to believe in his existence or not, but they could choose to reject the relationship that they had with him upon their creation. And many of them did decide to reject that relationship. And for them, from what we can tell, there is no redemption at all. For us, there is redemption. Okay? There is redemption. People are born into this world spiritually dead, disconnected from God, no relationship with him whatsoever, and no claim to the kingdom of heaven of any kind. All right? That's how people start into this world. And while we are living our lives, we are given invitations, we are given opportunities to repent, to surrender, and to embrace the new covenant such that we can have a relationship with our God and a place with him in all eternity. We have the opportunity for redemption in that sense, in that context. So his desire for us is that we be saved. His will for us is that we be saved. His will for us is also described as a will of God as a description of an inheritance that we receive as a result of his death. This is in Hebrews chapter 9, verses 15 and 16, the description of the will of God as the inheritance that we have received in Christ. And so there are some things that were predetermined, but not all things were predetermined. And most of these things are related to the subject of what God offers to groups of people. On an individual basis, if you have an individual destiny, if there is an individual plan laid out for your life in its entirety, if that's the case. Now, of course, he can plan things. He prepares works for us to do all the time. All right, so I'm not saying he plans and prepares nothing. It's just that when people say everything, that to me is inconsistent with all that we know that our God has clearly revealed. But with regards to the will of God as an inheritance that we have received, that describes what he gives to us that we can make use of as we live our lives, as we make our decisions and exercise our free will in our lives. We can live our lives with what he has given to us. And what has he given? Well, that is the Christian life. It is a discovery of what we have been given and to learn how to apply what we have from him. We have his love. We have his acceptance. We have his discernment. We have his wisdom. We have him as a person. All right, that's what we have. We have our God with us who will guide us and teach us and help us to live our lives and walk through the tribulations of life. And that's different from what most people would prefer. Most people would prefer destiny. They want everything to be decided by somebody else. They want things to be decided by God. that he has to come up with the plan. He has to have, the will. He has to have the definition for how we are to live. He has to be in control. No, we can't be making any decisions on our own. No, they don't want that. All right, they're afraid or whatever. I mean, there's lots of reasons, and it's unlikely that somebody's going to tell you what their reasons are if you ask them. They may not be able to put it into words themselves. They may not want to. Because the revelation of that might be really ugly, to say the least. But when you relate to your God in this way, when you relate to this idea that you have that all things are predetermined and destiny and the such, what you will end up with is a God of stone. That's a good description, in my opinion. I really do believe that a good description of this is a God of stone, because he might as well just be a rock. I mean, you might as well make an idol. You might as well just make an idol and say, this is my God. It's a rock. It's a God of stone, okay, who has decided all things already. And I just live and exist according to his desire, according to his design. And whatever happens is God. I have no personal responsibility whatsoever. It's all on him. And so if things go bad, well, then he owes me because he's turned me into a victim. And he'll pay up when I go see him in heaven. He will. This is what people end up with. It's either a God of stone who's present in front of them, or some God who's just so far out there in outer space someplace, dwelling in his place of unapproachable light, that he doesn't exist in a way that you can have a relationship with him at all. And so people don't, and these beliefs that people have lead them to that kind of a conclusion, that they really have no God with whom they relate to. They just don't. And if they want to pray, you might as well just write one out for them in advance. Just write a prayer out for them, because they have nothing to say. They have and there is nothing to say. There is no real person to relate to. And this is what God was explaining to the people throughout the centuries, that he is a living God. He is not a God of stone. He is not a God of destiny. He is a living, active participant in the world that he created. This is an important thing to understand. All right, so we have the idea of him being a rock. We live by his inheritance. That's a pretty good summary of, I think, of what he has had to say in the second part of this verse. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward into the third part, which is the idea of having good cheer. In this translation, good cheer. In others, we have the word joy. I like that one. Have joy, because he has overcome the world. Now, there is, of course, a lot to say about him overcoming the world. What does that really mean, to say that he has overcome the world, especially when there's all this tribulation going on, right? What does that mean? So there's a lot to say about this. I will speak about this in the next message. In this message, at the end of this one, I can say a little bit about the subject of having joy, especially in the context of tribulations. For this, I definitely have to tell you about my own personal experiences, though. I have to testify of what I have experienced myself. Now, I, of course, have not always been saved. I know some of you have no memory in your early childhood that does not include church, for example. But that's just not me. I got saved later in life. I had already been in the world quite a bit. I already experienced a lot of pain and suffering and tribulations and some joy as well in the world as a lost person, someone who did not know their God at all. And so I do know what it is like to experience tribulations in life without God. That I definitely can relate to. That I really understand. And I can remember, some of the tribulations. I experienced a lot of them in my youth. I experienced a lot of difficulties and a lot of problems. Some of them were, of course, because of my decisions. Other situations were because I was suffering the consequences of other people's decisions. But either way, I know what it's like to go through tribulations without God. And those tribulations, many of them were ugly. They were awful. The pain and suffering that I endured through some of these tribulations was so great that I could say with great confidence that I had no joy in those in any way whatsoever. Absolutely none. The way that things were definitely not the way that I wanted things to be. And the difficulties that I encountered through those, and what happened afterwards even was profound. I know what that's like to really suffer and to endure and to come out on the other side of that wishing that it definitely never happened at all. That I do know. But then I got saved. I discovered who the Messiah really is, and I recognized that there really is a God, and that I would live the rest of my life. I made the commitment, the decision that I would live the rest of my life acknowledging his existence, and that it would be an integral part of the life that I would build for myself, and that it would be represented in the decisions that I made. I made a commitment, I made a decision, and I've never turned back, and I've never felt bad about that at all. And I certainly could never turn back at this point for lots of reasons. Now, of course, I've made a lot of bad decisions since then. I've committed sin. There's plenty of that to go around, and I could speak about that at length. But regardless of those decisions, just like I made bad decisions for myself and I suffered the consequences from other people's bad decisions, I certainly continued to experience lots of tribulations, lots of difficulties in my own personal life, some of which were comparable with those that I had experienced before, and others since then have been much worse, and I'll speak about those in just a moment. But I did continue to experience tribulations. No shortage of tribulations in life at all. But what I discovered personally was that on the other side of these tribulations, what I discovered was that the Lord would relate things to me about himself and about myself and about the world that I was a part of that I simply could have never known unless I endured through those difficulties, through those struggles and those tribulations, so that he could speak to me about them. And he could speak to me in the context of those things and help me to see things through his eyes and to understand things in the way that he understood those things. And this became an experience after the tribulations that I would endure. And then later on in life, as many years would go by, I discovered that while I was going through tribulations and sufferings and difficulties, the Lord would begin to speak to me while I was going through them. And some of these were like the worst ever. In comparison with those struggles and tribulations that I experienced when I wasn't saved at all, and in comparison with those that I experienced when I was first saved and in my early years in the faith, these were ugly. These were just awful, well beyond what I had ever encountered before. And so to suggest that a person, if a person believes in God, then they're not going to have serious problems in life or troubles or tribulations, I certainly can't relate to that. I can say the exact opposite in some respects, especially when a lot of the tribulations and difficulties I have had have been related to the fact that I am committed to my God. It's just worked out that way with some of them. But the Lord was able to speak with me through the difficulties and the struggles and the tribulations in my own life. So I can speak of those circumstances where God has revealed a lot to me about himself after the struggles that I've had, but later on in my life, I discovered that he has related many of these things to me while going through them instead of me waiting until afterwards. Afterwards, there certainly have been opportunities for him to share more, but I'm going to say from my own personal experience that it's been going through them. It's while I'm going through them that he relates to me the most. And so when I have a new tribulation approaching, when I've got a new one coming, and I'm, at the moment when I'm doing this recording, I don't have one right now. So I'm sure that there's going to be a big one coming upon me pretty soon. I don't know what it's going to look like or where it's going to come from or who's going to be involved or anything like that. But I can have a sense of anticipation that when, all right, not if, but when the next one arrives, that the Lord is going to reveal great things to me and that the revelations will be such that I will be able to experience joy in the midst of the struggles and the tribulations that I will have, because I've been through this enough times. I've been through this many times. And through all of the time, through not all, but through most of the times, most of the recent ones, most of the times that I have been through great struggles and tribulations, the Lord has brought about a significant amount of joy in my heart as he has revealed himself to me, and he has revealed myself to me as well, and he has showed me the world that I'm a part of. And so just because of those things, I was able to experience joy before, and I know I will experience joy once again in the midst of those tribulations that are soon approaching, whatever they're going to look like. And so because I've been through this long enough, for a long time now, and I've been through these iterations many times over now, I can speak with great confidence and tell you that you have a God who wants to relate to you in the same way. I do. I genuinely believe that. And that when you have the troubles, the tribulations, the sufferings, the difficulties of life, do not forget to turn to him and ask him to show you something about himself in the midst of those things. And I believe that he will reveal something to you about who he is because of these tribulations. And so that when you come on the other side of these things and these difficulties, you'll be able to say, in some ways, you'll be able to say that it was worth it, because what you will have gained will certainly be much greater than what you have lost. And that's what I can say from my own personal experiences and from my own testimony, that of the many things that I have lost, and I have lost a lot, what I have gained has certainly been much greater than anything that I have ever lost. And for that, I continue to live in joy, and I continue to live in thankfulness. All right, so I'm going to pause here. That's kind of a short message, but I'll continue into the rest of this verse, the idea of him overcoming the world. I'll speak about that in the next message. For those of you who are using this for your small groups, I have a question for you that you can use to inspire some conversation. Which of your tribulations are you the most thankful for? Of the tribulations that you've had in your life, which ones would you say you're very thankful that you have experienced because of what you've gained? All right? Certainly you can say a lot about what you have lost, but what are the things that you can say about what you have gained? And I will continue into how he has overcome the world in the next message. Thanks.